Hello, everyone. We reached 7,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the comments and the kind words and the thumbs up. And we're going to start doing this animatronic work and let's get started. This is 3D printing animatronic creature part 10. Well, we're going to start here. I'm going to show you what I've been working on, and mainly to get clearance where the lower eyelid and the linkage connects to the eyelid, that clearance underneath there. And I've been mainly designing on it and just kind of connecting things together and just seeing what we're going to have to do, because eventually I want to connect this to the mouth, but more likely it's not going to be connected. It's going to be a separate piece. But what I'm doing here is I'm adding kind of a mesh look, kind of a sculpted bag underneath this eye. And what I've already done is I've connected that ring to, to give the clearance of the eyelid. And now I'm going to add this so-called mesh underneath this eyelid to give it, like I said, like a more sculpted look, you know, more, I guess, organic look. I highlighted that section of the eyelid socket and just this what you're seeing here and in SketchUp, and I made it into a component and I sent it out as an STL file so I have something to sculpt on top of. But I'm in Blender and I'm working this mesh, and like once again it was I pulled up a mesh which was a cylinder, removed the ends, and then I made some more rings or more vertices, and that way I could manipulate it a little bit more in the grab function of the sculpting of Blender. And as you see, I'm just basically just trying to match up what vertices that I can see in the SketchUp file and just kind of stretch this mesh and then form it like I kind of want it. And all this is subject to change also. I mean, this is the whole process, and I'm just trying to, to get a look. And plus, I or foresee what I'm going to be needing, because when that when that sculpting is done for the so-called alien creature itself, I want it to be able to flow underneath there, because if it's too big underneath there, it's going to start looking more human-like, and I'm just trying to get that so-called small mouth, big eye, and just trying to get some kind of an alien creature look. Is This is kind of fun to do, It's kind of relaxing when you kind of do these kind of sculpting the meshes. It just flows pretty good. And once again, I'm trying to match the so-called eyelid socket to its vertices, just kind of blend it in, and and more likely the mouth. I guess you would say the lower cheekbone's going to be connected underneath this also, but I wanted to put this mesh there, so because I'm going to have another mesh come underneath that also. But I'm going to probably have to cut the bottom of this off flat, because it's now going to be two pieces, and I'll explain that later why it has to be two pieces. Here I'm covering the existing mesh to what I previously have already done. So, but I want this natural or this organic look, but I'm removing all of that work that I did earlier. But I needed to do that to have a guide to do this. But I'll sit here and edit all this, remove what's underneath it, and then I'll attach this new piece to the main form. we're going to speed this part up of this editing right here. Because, and I shot probably 5 or 6 hours of this. And I was doing some video editing on doing it. But some of the stuff, you know, there's no need for you to see. And I'm trying to show you what all I have to do to make this animatronic. And there's a lot of planning, and there's a lot of design work to where you're making something that's never been made before, and then on top of that, you're it has moving parts, and you got to look at quality and strength, and you just don't want anything that's too flimsy. It's got to be strong and durable. I've made changes to this animatronic because you know, when you sit there and you're measuring, especially if you're seeing it on a big screen all day, you'll sit there and you'll think that this thing is, uh, you know, 27 millimeters thickness, or an inch thick or whatever, but really it might be 2 millimeters, and then you have to say, well, I gotta build that up. So, but that's just part of it. And it's when you get the whole thing made and built, and you can actually see it move, and it looks realistic, and just it's the closest thing of Dr. Frankenstein, and I've said that before. You know, a lot of these things, like this ring, there's a ring on the top of this of the upper eyelid. You'll see it right here. Now, that's going to be part of the skull lid or skull top, and where the screw points are in the of the lid socket, all that's going to be flattened, so I will have the skull to lay upon. So that's just going to be part of the ring of the skull. And the center brow and the nose area is going to be filled in, but you'll see that later what I have to do to make space for the nut area, for that threaded rod that goes through the center rod, through the eyeball, and through the eyelids. And that's one continuous rod on one eye. Now here, you'll see where I made some changes. And uh, right here, in this yellow area, and you'll see that tube coming down. That's a screw socket where the screw falls in. That's just the whole area. But this yellow space that you'll see here, that's a screw point to where I can screw down the mouth plate to this iMac part. And that's just things, and I'll have to countersink the area here in the design. But that's what I'm coming up with as right now. And all that area above it has to be open for the linkage to flow right. And I just don't want any kind of interference. And then you'll see this space here where the nose is. All this has to be open here. And I'll show you here in a second, but the reason why for that. But this bridge nose area right here, that needs to be there because I want the silicone to have something to grab a hold to there. If it's going to be an empty spot there, but the lips are going to be working there too. But right here is where that threaded rod comes through, and there's going to be a nut here, so you can uh, bolt down or screw down, as we say it in the South. You know, just connect this rod together. But I just make a simple nut design and use it to go by as a guide. But the space there is so I can get a tool to work this nut, and I have to have either my fingers or my tool to get in there. And that's where there's going to be a space there. Now, when I make the so-called the skull lid, I might be able to cover that some too. And I'm just trying to determine if I'm going to have some type of magnet on that skull lid there in that area. But you'll see where the screw point is going to be on the mouth area here. I worked on this thing for hours, and I was trying to have room, but the previously I designed these so-called lip hinges, the movements, these paddles for the lips. But there's also one thing you have to consider is how, if I had this in one piece, how would I get them in there? And you get to thinking, and if you see here, I'm moving that center lever there for the center lip. I won't be able to get it in there unless it's two pieces. And that means that when it's being built, I'm going to have to connect the lip hinges on the mouth first, and then I'm going to have to attach that plate to the upper plate where the eyelids are. But in designing to where the bridge of the nose is at, and that whole, I guess, the upper cheek area that I've been working on, that needs to be there for support. And it needs to, and also I could probably design it where I could connect that part so I could print one big piece. But it would just be easier this way just to print it, two separate pieces. But this is what the clearances that I had to been dealing with for the past, day, just working on this design just to make sure I have clearance. And I can bring that so-called the nose piece or the bridge on further down. So, and I might change that design, but we'll see. But I just need to make adjustments to this plate because you'll see here where I need to have where I can fit these in there and just slide them in place because there's also another rod that will go through that to make it a hinge mechanism. And then there's also, you got to make sure that you have, space where I can put a tool or a screwdriver or some type of wrench or whatever. But like right here, I'm going to show you how design a linkage for this mouthpiece. And this is the center lip. And the center lip linkage is going to be pulled from the top level, the top plate. Now, the other two lips, or the other lip mechanism that has like a forked lip, I guess you would call it, it's going to be pulled from the bottom of the eyelids. And I have to have that there just because I really don't have enough space to pull it, both of them, from the top. But as you see here, I just simply designed a linkage, tab so I can connect linkage to it. And then you have to also think that I'm going to have more than likely a 2mm screw nut going to be attached there. But I'm going to have to design the arm, as you see here, the linkage arm that will run from here to the servo to control this whole mechanism. A lot of these adjustments that I'm making on the video where I speed them up because, with it slow, it can get kind of boring. Well, boring to me, but y'all might like it. But I just like trying to speed it up a little bit so we won't be here for 4 hours. But so I got a tab started on the so-called, linkage. So I measure from the linkage to the so-called servo horn, and I had like 62 millimeters. So what I'll do is I'll extend this arm right here, this linkage, to like 62.5, whatever, and just make it this so-called this little linkage plate. But as you see here, it's better to move it to the other side and make it thinner. And you'll see here how I'm just cleaning it up, making it, narrow. But then I'm just going to move it to the other side to be closer to that servo. And sometimes I'll sandwich the tabs together where I can have a good grip on it, but that would make a longer screw. But as you see here, it's going through the table, so I got to make adjustment to this. So this is what I do to edit this to make it fit that table area. I just rotate this one part up, and then I'll just edit the whole thing to where it has a curvature and avoiding that whole table. But this is where I can get that clearance from that table. So I'll just make adjustments to this whole linkage here and connect the two together. And just at first I'll connect them, a simple block style. Then I'll come back with a circle tool and just kind of round everything off. But once again, now this will give me clearance from that table, but like I'll have another linkage for the other lip, and then there's 4 linkages for the eyelids. But wherever there's a servo, there's going to be linkages. So, and we have 8 here, 8 servos, so that's going to be 8 linkages. But yet there's 2 linkages for each eyelid. So I mean, it's a lot of parts, and you'll see here in a minute all the parts that I've been accumulating. But this so-called upper ring and that brow part will be combined and attached to the skull. So that the skull piece will be the largest piece of the whole animatronic. Well, next to the so-called chest piece. But this is what I have as far as accumulated pieces so far. We have our scalpel, and then we have the skull. It's so-called total 22 pieces so far, but I have several linkages that I've not made yet, and that will be later. But it's coming along. But I have 4 linkages for the eyelids, and the one we just made that you saw me make, that's just 5 linkages right there. But for every servo there's going to be 1 linkage, but there's the two eyelid servos that I have, they have 4 linkages. But it's just a learning, learn as you go and design it, make sure you have clearances, and design what servo you want in it, and kind of keep them all the same. But I'm gonna order another servo that's gonna be mainly a lower cost servo, because I want y'all to be able to experience what I'm doing, and that's the best way I can do it. But this is what I have so far. Now that will be printed. It's gonna this bottom plate's gonna have servo sockets underneath it, and then there's gonna be 2 main plates, and then we'll have everything just to connect together, and then we'll have it able to move. I like watching them watch videos where they repair the old watches, and that just fascinates me for something having such small parts, and all those parts have to be milled and casted and laid. But it's just fascinating to me to see that, and I guess that's what's kind of drawn me to making animatronics. But it's entertaining, and I want y'all to be part of it. And thank you for all the thumbs up and the sharing and the all the subscribers, and once again, thank you so much. Later.